The freestylers of piping are here. I'm Gregg Bendian. This is the ProgCast, where we talk about so many different forms of creative music, and this today is no exception because we have today with us a group of guys who make their own sound. They do their own thing, and that's something we like very much on this program. So I was lucky enough to hear them a few years ago at the New York Renaissance Fair, where they would play a regular set a few times a day, and got to know their material, purchased their CD, and was very supportive of all their stuff. And then when it came time to restart the Renaissance Fair this summer, they were there again and playing new stuff and with new percussion options added and new compositions, new compositional directions, shall we say. So I'm very happy to be able to welcome them onto the show today. We have Matt Hebner, Michael Hebner, I'm so sorry, David Duncan, and Armando Wood. Armando is the bass player, David is the bagpipe player, and Michael is the percussionist. Welcome, guys.
Thanks for having us.
So I'm curious where this starts, because as a vibraphone player, I immediately relate to the otherness of featuring an instrument that isn't typically featured if you think about how you're going to base a band around something. So this starts with the bagpipes?
Oh yes. Is that a question of how it started with the bagpipes?
No, it's a question of did this project start with you on the bagpipes?
More or less. I mean, the project started with Michael and myself. We had been playing together in various bands that featured bagpipes, and so the Freestylers of Piping was our attempt to do our own thing with the bagpipes as the featured instrument, I should say.
So what were the other projects that led up to this?
Well, we had been playing, we met in 2009 playing at the Southern California Renaissance Fair with a medieval German bagpipe band. Playing
What was the
mostly
instrumentation?
It was me playing tapan, that big drum, looks like a bass drum, and another percussionist on snare, and then a German bagpipe, and then a Rausch fife, which is like a bagpipe without a bag. You just blow straight into it, you know. And we did mostly, yeah.
Double reed?
Yeah.
It's
And
it's like the chanter portion of the bagpipe.
Right.
The chanter is what you play the melody on. It's the loud soprano instrument part, but the Rausch fife is just that without the bag. You blow into it.
And that band is called Volgamut, and they're really wonderful. And what was really wonderful for me about that band was how the leader of the band, Michael Gartner, how he plays Rausch fife and how he harmonized with the bagpipe. I just thought that was an absolutely magical sound, you know. And he did that really well. He's got a really good ear, and that's what first drew me to this sort of like sonic options of a bagpipe, you know.
I'd also like to add that, it was one cool thing about that band was with the arrangements in particular was that the roles that the bagpipe and the Rausch fife sort of played was that the bagpipe, I always thought of it as more like kind of like a rhythm guitar in the band, and the Rausch fife was kind of like a lead. And in that instrumentation, it kind of had this rock band kind of feel to it, even though we were playing ancient medieval instruments and stuff. And that was like the biggest appeal about Volgamut for me. So going into the Freestylers, I wanted to, take some of those elements and bring it into what we did as well, where we treated like the bagpipe more like, kind of like a rock guitar or something like that.
You call it Volgamut?
Yeah, Volgamut with a W. They were actually started in Germany in like the early 90s, I think.
Very interesting. It's a not a very well-known culture in America, is it?
No, which is, that goes into a whole other sort of topic of where we can perform. And I actually had a very eye-opening experience. I went over to Germany and Czechia with Volgamut a couple summers ago, and we played some festivals, and there was like 6 or 7 German bagpipe bands there, you know, but they were all playing like unison stuff and plastic reeds, and we just blew them away, you know. It was awesome. But there was just like this huge audience for all this stuff like over there. And so that's where a lot of my research has been, honestly, in finding music festivals over in Central Europe, things like that.
I know the circuit well from touring it, well, with a few different bands. One was a group called the Musical Box from Quebec, where
Oh,
we
cool.
were creating the early Genesis music, the Peter Gabriel.
Love it. Yeah.
Recreations with Genesis on board. And that was true. You're right. That's a heartland of music. People love that music. They love the music they love there, and they support it. And it's interesting how well did it do in Scandinavia?
Oh, we went to Czechia in Germany, but that was with Volgamut. Yeah, and we did great. Yeah, you know, the people loved it, and that's what made me want to. You know, I want the freestylers to go over there, because. Okay, like, so a lot of the gigs that we wind up playing are Renaissance festivals, which are amazing venues for us to play, you know, these big open air places where we can be loud and a big crowd. But I think you can tell by the way we dress and sort of present the band, we're not really trying to present any sort of like a Scottish vibe. And for a lot of people, yeah, a lot of people in you know, like they sort of equate, you know, bagpipes with sort of these other things, and it's just like an instrument for us, you know. That's really kind of just where we're treating it as, you know, without any sort of cultural implications, I guess, you know. So I was just really delighted to see at the places that I played at in Germany that there was so many bagpipe groups without that sort of, you know, they were just listening to music. There wasn't this idea of like, oh, we're in Scotland, you know, which is nothing wrong with that, but that's not really what we're trying to do, you know.
Yeah, and if I can add to that, I mean, you know, like here in the United States, perceptions of the bagpipe are pretty limited. Usually there's this cultural association with, you know, Scottish traditional culture, and most of the bagpiping you see is out of that tradition. A lot of people don't even know that there are different types of bagpipes, such as the German medieval bagpipe that we played in Volgamut. And then even, you know, from my conversations with Mike when he was overseas, a lot of the bands over there, even when they're playing German medieval bagpipes, their idea of how to present themselves is very, I mean, you're kind of telling me, like, Mike, that they all kind of dress the same, like kind of like Vikings, and they all have the same
Yeah,
kind of
you
like
know,
vibe.
I mean, I know I have long hair and a beard, but it's that whole thing, you know, like with like, you know, just like yeah, like Viking sort of clothing and the sort of image of, you know, maybe wearing armor or something, you know, like this sort of thing that doesn't really have anything to do with music. It's a show, and they're usually great shows. They usually put on great shows, but that's just not our interest, you know. Our interest is actually trying to put on a really good music show.
Now, I think the first time I heard you, you had not the same bass player as you do today.
Correct.
So how did you come into the picture, Armando Wood?
I met Mike at another gig in Hollywood, I think at the Edmond or something like that. We were both subs from a mutual friend. Well, that was how I met him, you know. We hung out, we were chatting, he gave me a CD, and then he hit me up like that December and was like, hey, can you come record on this album? And I did. And then that April, I think, was when I first started playing with them. That was the first gig, and been playing ever since. Well, there was kind of a large break, but even, you know, once things were kind of cooling down in that, we started to get together and start rehearsing and keep busy even through, you know, slow times for us. So it's probably been 2.5, 3 years, something like that.
Hmm. Almost 3 years, yeah.
How do you collaborate on compositions? Because I also noticed that in this current batch of pieces, we're hearing from both Armando and Michael in terms of the composition. Is that different or is that new?
Arrangements have definitely evolved. So some of it I wouldn't even say is new. It's more just we like took spots that we could add more musical content to, and I think we've done that with a lot of the tunes, even if they're not new. When I first joined, there was kind of I had a lot of difficulties just figuring out how to make the whole thing work pitch wise and like, you know, sonically. How is an upright bass going to somehow like fit into this? And once I figured out, you know, tuning and how to get everything sounding pretty much okay, then it's since then it's kind of opened up, and now it's a little more fun where you can start looking at different options for things, you know. But in the beginning, I was kind of like just blindsided by the whole affair, not really knowing how to. I've never done it before. Most people haven't played with a bagpiper before, you know.
I think it's worth noting too that we didn't originally start with a bassist. We were originally just a pipe and drum band. So bringing the bass voice was completely new for Michael and myself as well.
Yeah, we didn't really have any, you know, I knew that we needed something like that, but I wasn't really, you know, it really took a player like Armando to come in and kind of own the role and sort of like recognize what had to be done.
Yeah, and he's done a great job with it. We're really lucky to have him.
You know, when we started this band, or we started talking about this band, me and David, a long time ago, you know, and it's gone through a lot of, not a lot, but a decent amount of permutation. I think really like, I don't speak for David, but like this is really the closest to the sound I envisioned at first, you know, when we started out. I wasn't, you know, I loved having two bagpipes because I love that sound, but this is really for this band. This is what I envisioned, and it really took somebody like Armando to come in and be like, "Oh, right, this is what has to happen." Blah blah blah, you know. And it's been great, and we had a great time the last 3 months playing. There's a lot of really great shows.
Yeah, you guys sounded great.
Thanks, man.
So
we just got back like this last week. I mean, we were on the road for almost 3 months in total. So
you went to multiple festivals.
yeah.
Yeah, we started out at Maine because why not just go the furthest drive you could, you know. And then we were there for a couple of weeks, and then we went to the Bristol Renaissance Fair, which is in southern Wisconsin. We were there for 3 weekends, and then we finished up in New York for 7.
Wow.
It's
It was
fun.
great to get out and play again, you know. I mean,
Yeah.
it's really nice having this large outdoor venue, and especially with everything that's happened. It was
A
really
lot of
nice.
friends that work there, getting to see a lot of people I haven't seen in a while and getting caught up. It was great. Yeah.
And I got to say, shout out to the crowds in Bristol because we've never played
Oh,
for audiences that were so receptive to our music before. I mean, I know you've seen us in New York, Greg, and you know we get some decent audiences at our shows, but out in the Bristol Renaissance Fair in southern Wisconsin, they were cheering and it was great to play for crowds like that.
Oh, that's so cool.
very gratifying, especially coming off of, you know, the year of, you know, and then, you know, put all this stuff out there and to get that response, all that weight. It was really wonderful. Can't wait to go back.
Yeah, well, I mean, I can tell people who haven't heard these pipers that they do have their own way of looking at Eastern music, looking at Western music. In a way, it's really funny because without the role of the bass, it is much more Eastern, isn't it?
Hmm.
You know, there are similar instrumentations in Eastern cultures where they use the tapan and double reed instrument. Um, I'm not sure of the instrument. It starts with a Z. I know that, but yeah, tapan. And there's these duos, you know, of tapan and it's like almost like a bombard, almost like the Roush fife that Mike and I were talking about.
The
We played with
Zorna?
him. I think that might be it. I think so. Yeah,
It's Armenian, actually. Well, we call it the Zorna.
maybe. Yeah.
Oh, that's yeah. Yeah, it's so interesting because in a way, there's always kind of a fourth player because of the drone aspect of the instrument. And I know that you've experimented with changing the range of the instrument as well on the pipes.
Yes. Uh, I did start to do that. I guess around 2011 or maybe something like that is when I first started experimenting with extending the range of the instrument down by about um, so a B flat to a low G. Um, so it's like a drop tuning. So you don't have the two in the scale. You just go from the G to the B flat, which I guess is a minor third, Armando.
Yeah,
So 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 it gives you this innate pentatonic scale, which to me had been unexplored before on the bagpipes, but unbeknownst, they've been doing this in France with Bagad groups for a while now, and they call it the do chanter, which do is C in French, so that's do re mi. But yeah, so they've been doing this in France for a while, but they actually tune the drones to C too. So they treat it like it's just a minor instrument. Although, I was hearing it as more of like a minor pentatonic scale with the drones playing the B flat as like the minor third, which I actually think is really sonically nice. Um,
yeah. That's a key that gets a lot of play in a lot of the tunes. It's kind of satisfying to, I think, also sound wise because
Armando,
I'm
you got to
so.
try to come in louder, brother.
Oh, okay. Can you hear me? Yeah.
If you can be any
Yeah.
closer or louder, right? His level's
Okay.
lower, isn't it? We can edit
Oh,
this.
okay.
We're fine.
All right.
Is that
I
better? Can that mic get closer to your mouth?
Yeah, I'm not. I think I'm using the mic from the webcam actually. Um,
Oh, okay.
should be fine. Yeah.
All right. Sorry. Continue, please.
That key is particularly satisfying, I think, to play in because it's really easy for me in that key to get underneath the drums because I'll just play a low G on my E string, and that's there's not like the other keys if we're playing in like C minor or if we're playing in there's one tune in like D Locrian or something like that. I can't get underneath the low drone. And on any tune that we're doing in G minor in that alternate tuning, I can get this low note underneath it. So I think that's kind of nice to hear.
yeah, the drones always play one pitch, like it's not a variable pitch. So when Armando comes in and plays the notes that I can't play underneath it, it does sort of fill in the missing harmonic element, that the drones can't do on certain tunings.
Yeah, that's true. It's very audible. I've been in situations, weird instrumentation situations. One was Anne LeBaron's Phantom Orchestra, where the bass instrument was tuba, Marcus Rojas. Do you guys know Marcus?
Yeah.
So he had taken on the bass role in a situation with harp, with percussion, and you're looking at, well, what are the roles of the instruments, but also what can we get happening compositionally? And so I wonder how everybody thinks about that in the context of this band. Like, Michael, how do you approach this music compositionally?
Well, it's kind of interesting. Like the one tune that I wrote that we play, I actually wrote it for two bagpipes initially, and then just kind of gave the sort of like meaty part of the song that I was kind of important. I just was like, oh, Armando can play this part, and it just became this thing. I actually have been working on something else that is kind of similar where at one point David's just going to be playing like a repeating ostinato, and Armando is going to take the melody. Yeah. But how do I approach to it? I don't know. Like usually I'll just sit down and write like a riff or something, and then just come off of that, you know.
Yeah.
Sometimes I feel more inspired, you know, than others, or sometimes I think about like a certain tune or something, or I, you know, like there's always like generally a goal. Like I definitely was like, okay, I want to sit and write a song in 7, but I want it to be like, I wanted to have an intro that, you know, is kind of like a rubato, but kind of when you play it in 7, you know, I just wanted to like sort of manipulate melodies in a way that sounded pleasing to my ear, I guess, and kind of reminded me
You
of
wanted to
like,
compose, you mean? You
yeah, right. And it's just stuff, you know, like reminds me of like Genesis and like Yes and stuff like that. And
exactly. I could have put it
70s
better.
King Crimson.
Thank you.
So
And good luck, everyone. We're all out there trying to do it, one form or another. Trust me.
but that's what I love about this. Was so gratifying, and that's what's kind of been the progression of this band too, is starting out and playing these fairs and understanding that, you know, like at first, you know, you can only get away with so much, and then just sort of like getting away with more, just, you know, like pushing it more and more to the point where, you know, it's, you know, I think we can just kind of, you know, like I think the next step is David's electronic stuff, which I'm sure he was, you know, he's gonna tell you all about. That's basically the next step for us to implement in the group and our sound. And, you know, maybe we can get that at the Renaissance Fair too, you know. You never know.
Well, it should be recorded because I've been curious about this, David, and I've been curious about how that would affect what goes on in the Armando department. So tell me about this electronic setup and why it exists.
You know, it's been a dream of mine to sort of play and you know, and invent like an electric version of the bagpipe. And I've been dreaming of it since probably like 2008 or something like that. And you know, I spent a lot of years um, kind of messing around with piezo pickups and doing little modifications on instruments at home, and eventually came up with something that worked. I guess the whole concept behind that was I love guitar pedals. Like I love, you know, I love manipulation of sound. I love distortion, you know, and bagpipes already have sort of a natural kind of like distortion to
Double
them,
reed.
which yeah, the double reed, it's got that yeah, I mean, I, you know, like looking at on like at the wavetable, you know, it's already very distorted. So when I figured out how to amplify the bagpipes, like I mean, the distortion already just seems to go hand in hand with the tone. And so, you know, I mean, I'm a fan of like rock and roll. Like I listen to a lot of like stoner metal. That's kind of my favorite genre right
What is
now. And
that? I don't know stoner metal.
you know, it's like I'm sure you've heard of the band Queens of the Stone Age. I think they were maybe the most mainstream of those acts. But there's it's basically about playing like 70s, you know, high gain amplifiers cranked to 11, and then slow.
Like Soundgarden?
You know, no, I mean that's sort of in the same vein, but I mean a lot of these bands look to Black Sabbath for inspiration.
Well,
Um,
everyone should.
Yeah,
I
right.
agree. I agree. The
We all
bands.
must look to Ozzy and Satan. We all must go the way.
Yeah, I mean, there's this
I do
whole
as
like,
Ozzy does.
that's yeah. There's this whole band, you know, genre of bands that basically look to like the slower, sort of stonier riffs as their whole like basis for what they do, and some of them are even just purely instrumental. But usually, you know, yeah. So it's a whole subgenre, and I really just like the sounds, you know, of like overdriven heavy guitars, and I hear it, you know, in the bagpipe already. So it's like when I, you know, amplifying the drones, putting distortion on those, and then, cranking the chanter to 11 and adding like an octave down pedal. Like those sounds are cool to me, and so I just want to keep pushing that, like in things that we do in the future too.
Has that been recorded?
Yes. The Cultivator actually was the first studio release we did featuring the electric bagpipes.
Didn't you put phasers on your drones on another track too?
Thunderclap.
That's true. That's right. And the entire intro to our most recent album, Tupelo Turn, was sort of me doing like a wah pedal and an octave down and a big muff on the chanter. So
Best intro to an album we could have possibly hoped for. It's just like, bam.
yeah.
I'm really always interested in all of the different electronics David's putting together. I think one of the coolest things that we've sort of talked about is how he can manipulate the drones. I think even so many things you could do. There's a phaser on the drones in one track that I've always loved, but also David's messed around with the pitch shifting pedal on the drones. So he can kind of like play chord changes and different things by manipulating this pitch shifter pedal.
You mean like the whammy pedal that has like harmonizer? Is that what we're talking about?
The one you use on the drums, I think, is different. He has a whammy on the chanter sometimes.
Yes. Yeah. I have this Pitchfork Plus pedal. It just came out. Electro Harmonics just put it out. It's got 2 different pitch shifting engines, so you can actually save up to 3 voices at once, and then you can use the foot switches to switch between those voices. So
cool. That's great. So that's a whole frontier, really. No one has really done that with the pipe.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
David literally has the patent on the chanter.
Oh, the chanter.
Well, yes, the pickup system is something that I've been developing. Hopefully, one day to market as like a product.
Why not? Of course.
Yeah.
If it works, that's fantastic. I just kind of spaced on, not flipped on the Chazoid. Do you guys follow Colonel Bruce Hampton at all?
No.
Aquarium Rescue Unit. Oh my God. So he has this string instrument that he built called the Chazoid.
Wow.
Look that up.
What a name.
Hands out that are listening now. I know you know. If Colonel Bruce were with us, he'd be on this show. This is the world that they all inhabit, along with Beefheart, Parch, and we have the Freestylers here. They're doing their thing. What's happening in the percussion department? I noticed more stuff on stage this time around.
Yeah, just sort of getting more comfortable. So when you first saw us, that was actually the first year that we were playing where I was the only percussionist. Before we had another guy, and I only played Tapan, basically.
So there were 2. I saw you with 2 at one point.
Okay, right on. Yeah, so it was so I did that for a bunch of years. So it was just a matter of, I'll probably, but the next time you see me, I'll probably have more stuff too. So it's just a matter of getting more comfortable with the setup and figuring out what I can do with a little tiny rod of bamboo and, a stick on it. So, it's a constant work in progress.
There's a lot going on over on this side. Yeah.
Yeah. But it's fun, it's unique. It's becoming something that's becoming somewhat unique to me, which is kind of fun too. And so yeah, I'm just you're probably gonna see more stuff next year. To my back's chagrin.
Much respect. It's in acoustic settings. That's one thing. as a percussionist, I always try to adjust my setup to the acoustic setting.
Mhm.
So if there's banjo, if there's clarinet, depending on what the instrumentation is, and there's no electronic instruments,
Mhm.
and we were to just play at room volume, what would my freaking setup be? So I've spent a lot of time in that area.
Mhm.
And it's so interesting how different people come up with different solutions to that. And yours is really cool. And I've seen it evolve. And I like also hearing how much Armando's playing with the bow. Big
Yeah.
fan of your bow work, buddy.
Oh, thanks. That's something I really enjoy doing with the band. I try to play with the bow in a lot of bands. I mean, sometimes it doesn't fit, but even if it's a band where it wouldn't fit, I'll usually try to take a bowed solo or do something like that, so that it's more interesting for me, more interesting for audiences, I think. And it's an interesting like timbral thing too, like a bowed, the roughness of a bowed upright bass happening alongside the drone of a bagpipe is kind of an interesting
Perfect. Perfect.
Yeah, yeah, it kind of matches the tonal characteristics of, like the sort of that electric guitar thing where you've got like kind of the overdrive, the saturation, the rich harmonics that the bow
Do you
provides.
guys know the bass player Larry Grenadier?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
No.
Monster.
So Larry Grenadier got the Metheny trio gig, according to Pat, because he was the loudest acoustic bass player without feeding back. He had figured out how to do it loud.
Wow.
And that was, he could play halls. So you could bring
Mhm.
him as a trio into a hall and it would be that much of a presence because he had figured out how to do. And listen, I've worked with Mark Dresser. I work with some incredible upright players, Kermit Driscoll, the list goes on, but William Parker, and they had a projection and they weren't necessarily relying only on amplification. And that's another thing. The instrument, the bass, the bassist, the bow. I think because it's more expressive with the bow. There's a limited. Don't you feel there's a sort of less expressive with pizzicato?
It's harder. I mean, and to it's if you're playing just plucking, right? It's almost like you have to think more like a pianist or something in terms of making a musical phrase, right? You have to scale things in a way. You have to use your attack to create a shape, and it's a little more to think about. With the bow, you just do it, right? There's a million different ways you can attack a note or change a note while you're playing it. And yeah, I mean, I played a lot of classical music, and I really do love playing with the bow. So it's definitely welcome. I love doing it.
Yeah, I feel like it's a big part of, in my music, it's a big part of bridging the gap between the jazz and the chamber.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah, and there's a lot of people that inspired me on that front. People like Slam Stewart, Paul Chambers. I guess maybe even more so though. I really like Charles Mingus's bowed stuff. A lot of and he would do interesting melodic combinations with the bowed bass. And anyway, there's a lot of these guys nowadays. There's so many good bass players that can play incredible solos and melodies with the bow. So it's a totally kind of new. It's like this new wave of upright players. I feel like a lot more things like that.
Yeah, I've watched it evolve over time. I kind of realized that I take it for granted, that I'd be writing these things off of the neck for dresser, or double stops that were ridiculous or artificial harmonics lines. And so this whole world of extended bass, which Bertram Turetsky really gets a lot of credit for starting in
Oh
San
yeah.
Diego, right?
Yeah, all of his solo pieces. Yeah, man. I don't think I've ever performed any, but I've taught some to students, and they're a lot of fun. Those are cool.
So it's such a rich instrument, and so I've done it with percussion, bass, and clarinet, percussion, bass, and trumpet, percussion, bass. So different trio settings like this, where the bass is just given, you know, a lot to do, and the bass is going to move up top, and other people can hold stuff down while the bass can move, and so that's part of exploring that whole trio thing, isn't it?
Yeah, I think another thing that I'm sure all of us are kind of aware of is there's an inherent resistance with like all of the instruments we're playing. Like especially now that Mike's doing his insane setup, like you know the bagpipes have all this resistance and all these technical things that have to occur to make it work, right? The upright bass is kind of unruly. Mike has this large hybrid unruly setup. It all kind of,
What
in my
speakers
mind,
play through?
I was playing through David's Terror bass actually when you saw us recently.
David, what do you play through?
Well, what Armando was using in New York was like a little Ampeg 210 cabinet with the
I mean, when
orange.
you're like, when you're throwing your whole electronic setup, what is your idea?
Oh, well, I have a 2x15 cabinet. It's like it's a Sun vintage speaker cabinet from the 70s
Okay.
because it gets loud and you need the 15s because it goes so low, especially when I put the octave pedal on the drones. I tried running it through that 210. Actually, I had two 210s at one time, thinking that I could get away with that. But I just was hearing so much speaker distortion. I was afraid that I was going to blow the cab, so I upgraded to 215.
Cool.
Yeah, the stack has gotten pretty insane at this point. You know, it's pretty impressive. It'd be great to take it out somewhere. It'd be a real pain to set up and tear down, but
I did a show with an art school friend of mine. He was doing like like a keyboard setup with some synthesizer effects on it, like a Moog and stuff like that. And I brought my whole stack, and we did a little like improvised like kind of shoegaze set at an art gallery one time.
Yes, shoegazing, the term that I had to be taught by one of my students. I didn't know what that is. Maybe some of the listeners know what that term is, but shoegazing has to do with the number of foot pedals the guitarist has, something like that.
Yeah, I think it just means a lot of pedals.
Doing what?
Well, I mean, I guess that's where where the artist comes in. I mean,
Are we talking David Torn here? Like, what are we talking about?
I mean, speaking for myself, like I really only rely on a few different sounds. I mean, octave is actually my favorite effect to put the bagpipe through, especially the chanter. And then so octave, wah. I'm about to start experimenting with the univibe. Because I've been listening to like some Jimi Hendrix. I just love the sounds he gets with that expression pedal and the univibe, and and then fuzz too. But it's hard to find fuzz that works well with the frequency range. Like I'm always having to figure out how to manipulate the frequency range to get it to interact properly with these guitar pedals. Given that there's a different frequency range for guitar versus bagpipes.
I tell you, man, I'm so down with what you're talking about, because I did a record in like 99 with my group Interzone. We did it in Santa Monica at Wayne Pete's place, New Zone Studios. And I went to an isolation booth with the vibraphone so that we could do processing. And that's what because I was up against Nels Cline on guitar. And I wanted it to be, completely in your face.
Wow.
And we added a bunch of, it's fuzz vibes. It's like when Chick is playing on the Miles stuff with that, whatever fuzz face on the, the Wurlitzer or Rhodes.
Wow.
And that's the thing. I like you push your instrument. You push your instrument a little bit to kind of, like, I always think it's in competition with guitar anyway, where it's all guitar envy. Come on, let's face it.
Well, the guitar, has played that role for so long. It's about time for somebody else to come in and say, oh, we can do this too.
See, the real trick is if you get a guitarist in your band and then you have to go head to head, man.
You see, that's the thing.
Up.
I know
I went
Armando
through that shit, man. It's on record.
Armando has
Fuzz Vibes. I credited it because I wanted people to notice that I was fucking with the guitar.
Nice.
Anyway.
Yeah, I'm against having a guitarist in the band. I want to fill that role myself.
It's like Hendrix joined Emerson, Lake and Palmer. You know that story.
Who did?
There was talk of, in the day, there was talk of Hendrix joining Emerson, Lake and Palmer as a quartet. And Emerson, of course, could never give up the spotlight to Hendrix.
That'd be weird. That'd be so weird.
But Hendrix was headed toward Miles anyway at that point.
That's
Speaking of trios,
well,
I mean,
Miles was headed towards Jimmy.
For sure. Yeah, it was definitely mutual. And that's what's so sad about September of 70, because that's it. That's all you get. I was telling my students this the other day, like, it's literally from 66 till September of 70, and that's it.
Mm-hmm.
And all this work Hendrix did blew open this whole universe of sound and this whole way of thinking about the guitar. And you get the, you see everybody after that, Adrian Belew after that, Derek Bailey after that, Pat Metheny after that, all these guitar players who are living in a post-Hendrix world. There's literally before Hendrix and there's after Hendrix.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think there's any arguing that. But yeah. Trio's huge, like Band of Gypsies, super important trio.
Yeah.
But it was too confrontational. It was too Black Panther, they thought. Really strange. The resistance to that now he had a black band. So they couldn't deal with that.
Right.
What year was that?
That's right before. That's the New Year's of 70, isn't it?
Yeah, I think that's that concert that they released, right?
Yeah.
The Fillmore. Yeah. Fillmore,
and it's intense. Machine Gun.
Yeah.
And he's playing machine guns, and it's the Vietnam War, and it's on, and he's not doing a show. This is interesting because if you read the Bill Graham book, there's a lot of good stuff about how Bill and Jimmy had a relationship where Bill was a fan of Jimmy's music. He didn't care so much for the histrionics. And people did come, I don't know. I mean, I asked people, like, when you went to see Hendrix, did he do the teeth thing? Did he set this on fire? Did he do that? Did he play behind? How much of this is like what we end up with Pete Townsend still having to do this stuff? How much of this is the music and how much of this is an act? So he got in Jimmy's face and he said, yeah, nice show. And then what you hear on the recording is him bearing down and not fucking around and just playing his balls off for that concert. And I think that's
Winterland?
Winter.
Right.
That's oh wow, there's a woodchuck out in my backyard.
I had that Winterland tape.
Is it Winterland or Fillmore?
Bill Graham?
I think it's Fillmore East.
Yeah, probably.
Well, in any case, it was, I think my favorite band. I love Mitch and I love everything he does, but I just thought a Band of Gypsies was an important band. We got off on the topic of guitars when we're talking about how we all are sort of beholden to them in some way or another.
Yeah. I've been watching like these clips of Jimi Hendrix and this live in Maui video that's on YouTube now, and it's just fantastic. I mean, it's Mitch on drums, and then the bassist Billy something, yeah, and then Jimmy,
Cox.
Billy Cox, and I mean, they sound so good, and like, I mean, that's where I've really been honing my ears to like try to think about like the next Sonic Frontier.
Final band, I think, isn't it?
Yeah, I think so. And I mean, that's where I've heard like, Jimmy using the unified pedal where he basically makes his guitar sound like a ray gun. and it's just the coolest, most out of this world kind of thing. And it's like, I mean, I don't know, I just my mind goes, okay, well, how can I do this with the bagpipes? And so that's kind of where my ear's been lately.
So interesting because, I worked briefly with Jan Hammer and he was approaching it from the synthesizer. He was saying, how do I go head to head with top guitar players with a keyboard? Because, they were stuck with the Rhodes with maybe ring mod, some phasers. There was like the Neutron biphase pedal. Do you remember this pedal? Big
I'm not
boxy thing.
aware.
And so this is what they had to go with. They had the Rhodes and they couldn't get much louder to compete with guitar. But when the mini Moog came, then they had the firepower to go head to head with guitar. And so it's interesting how that transformation is similar too.
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's like, it's really,
Anyway, sorry.
for me, it's really about the sound of the amplifiers. I mean, it's like, that's where that overdrive comes from. Like, the tube amps, the power tubes, like really saturated and everything. And like, so that's what I've been so, I think, drawn to, like, especially with like Hendrix, 'cause I know he played those Marshalls just cranked. And I mean,
It's
you
so
just get,
true. It's so true. We
yeah.
covered this as well, where it's like, how did Eddie Kramer figure out how to deal with his ribbon mics being destroyed by sheer volume, blowing out gear in that?
Yeah.
Can you imagine? And when you listen to it, you take for granted. I'm talking about, are you experienced, for the people who have no idea what I mean? It's like, you can tell he's freaking loud. You know what I mean? You can tell he's loud. Like, that's a new level of confrontation. I don't know what it was like to be there at that time, but people were freaked out by it because it's a new level of confrontation. It was in your face. And
And the
apparently
bagpipes,
always very loud.
I'm sorry, but yes, the bagpipes also have that same character, that same quality. I know that for a fact because when I start warming up before the shows, like everybody goes, "Oh," when I blow into the chanter and they first hear it, everybody's startled because they don't expect, something acoustic to be so loud. And
Yes.
so, and then on the same note, one of my personal influences is the jazz bagpiper Rufus Harley, who had a career in the '60s with a string of albums he released on Atlantic Records. Anyway, he was in cohorts with John Coltrane, and I guess at one point he had called John Coltrane and asked him if they could record an album together. And John Coltrane said something to the effect of, "Well, what am I going to play?" Implying that the bagpipes steal the show every time. So he didn't want to do an album with Rufus because, I mean, the bagpipes are obviously going to take center stage. And so, I mean, there's just another thing to draw from when you're pushing it with the bagpipes. It's like you already have an instrument that is going to take center stage. So it's like we're kind of a maximalist group. So it's like, let's just take it and, go over. So.
Now, you use the term maximalist, and this is really interesting because coincidences are like this are funny. I'm speaking to makeweirdmusic.com, which is a really cool site that has interviews with people, creative artists doing different kinds of things, a lot of Crimson content and other. I've been on there a couple times. And, this whole idea of repertoire and doing your own thing, and this whole inclusiveness now of different types of weird music, and people being tired of just only electronic music, and the more unique the band, the more important the work is. And I think this is a trend, because I can tell you for the longest time, you tried to have your band, your sort of chamber ensemble, you deal with your amplification issues, you try to bring it around in a van, however you can bring it around, and you make it happen. Is there a new recording?
Not currently, no. There's things that we're gonna probably start working on, like, hopefully soon. We'll probably take a little break from playing for a little bit, and hopefully this winter get some stuff together. It's actually, I'm really excited because it's gonna be our first time really to have like Armando in more of a collaborative writing thing, you know. And
Artificial harmonics, Armando.
Yeah, you think so?
Of course.
I've tried using natural harmonics and it's way too edgy. You know, because I tune my strings relative to the drone, so they should work, right? But no, they sound horrible.
Is that right? Interesting.
Yeah, you know, there's a lot of weird stuff about the tuning of the chanter. You know, like most of it's tuned.
Oh wait, I didn't ask you this earlier. We should have cleared this up. What is your tuning for this band?
For the bass, it's
Yes.
just I'm tuned up like basically a quarter step. The bagpipes are just under the key of B flat, so they're pretty much like a B 3/4 flat, right? And so what I do is I tune my A string to that, and then I use harmonics to tune the E string up to a F sort of flat, right? And then it's all relative. The only weird one is my G string ends up being the seventh or the flat seventh relative to the B flat, the tonic. And if I'm to tune that to JI, it sounds horrible. I have to tune that pretty much as a tempered minor seventh, which is also the same as what's on David's bagpipes. So it's edgy. It's like an edgy seventh. Other than that, though, it's all like pretty straightforward.
Other than that, yeah.
Well, yeah, I mean, like you just have to make a call, right? Are you going to go with like what's going to sound good against the drone on its own, or I have to do something that's going to work for the different keys, you know?
Hey man, big fan of Scordatura, and that's something that's been coming up a lot recently too, because think about if you have an instrument that will take it, I guess is really the question. You know, why not explore that? Because your options, think about Joni and all the sort of different chord shapes that became available just based upon string relativism, you know, and just what was based upon what was possible, what's playable.
I've had one idea that I don't have an instrument to try this on yet, but I have often thought that if I had a 5-string electric bass, that I could get that low B down to a B flat that's like 2 octaves below the low drone. But those notes are usually so floppy and weird. I don't know if it would work, but maybe. I mean, I've always thought, well, that'd be pretty cool to be able to get all the way 2 octaves beneath that low drone.
Well, do you know Meshuggah's 8-string stuff?
Yeah, I've heard some of that. Yeah.
You guys know that stuff?
I know Meshuggah, but I'm
Mike-
not familiar. I'm not familiar with any like songs off the top of my head.
Michael, have you heard them?
just a very little bit.
Because that's an 8-string instrument that goes down 2 strings below the E.
Yeah.
So, and they sustain down there. I mean, obviously, it's a different, you know, they're customized and all of that. But I mention it because it's pretty remarkable how fleet they are with it when you're considering exactly that kind of thing, where the playability of a flaccid string is different than the playability. But they have the gauging worked out, and of course, it's immaculate.
It
How
would
do you
be
find-
fun to try. It would be fun to try.
How do you find speakers with the frequency range to cover that? You know, that low end.
They're not on
spectrum?
stage. There's no speakers on stage. Everyone plays in ear, and the house sound is controlled by a genius.
Okay.
And no,
Amazing.
seriously, it's so nailed down. Like Meshuggah's latest live thing, if you can find it, from 2019.
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah, it's remarkable because the light show is synced with their polyrhythms, so that's shown to you. And the band is just subdividing, and tone is great. It's really remarkable how good you can sound with distortion now. It's like almost, you know, and of course, like, hey, I'm speaking as an envious of guitar player person. You know, I have vibe envy. So you know, that 8-string thing was something that I just thought in the case of Armando where, I mean, I play with with 5-string acoustic bass players, and I want to say Jay Anderson. Does that ring a bell?
No,
Who
I
is
don't
that?
know.
And he had a low B string.
Okay.
Oh wow.
It's usually like a classical bassist.
Classical,
you
yeah.
might see them, yeah. They're not super usable pizzicato at all, but I use the bow a lot with the band, so there, lots of different ideas like that. I've often thought the way I would do it would be on an electric, or get an electric and make a bump set and just not have a high G string sort of thing. But yeah, a lot of logistics there with gauging and making sure you can actually hear it through your speaker, and so I just haven't done it yet.
Yeah, I hadn't thought of electric in this band, but if you were to go electric, then your tuning system would change, but your bass part would be more, no, not more processable, but certainly you have finger versus plectra, right?
Yep.
And then you have whatever other implementation you want to use. It seems like you could do a lot of damage with electric too.
We've actually done a lot of that just in rehearsal. Just it's not a lot of that's made it out, but we've played a lot with me playing electric bass, and it's kind of fun too. It ends up being more of like an electric guitar kind of role when I do that, because I can play a lot of power chords or fourths or different harmonized notes that can really like beef out the kind of sound. Or really, I'm trying to keep up with like David and like all of these effects.
Does that change your setup, Michael?
Yeah, we had, when we were rehearsing earlier this year and trying out more of the electric stuff, I was playing a more typical drum setup.
Yeah.
Without the tapan and all that.
It's still rhythmically the same kind of thing. Rhythmically, where is this music coming from, David?
Oh, rhythmically, man. Oh, that's a good one. I think I just think about that. I'm sure Mike has some things to say about that.
Well, that's what I didn't want to be obvious and ask the drummer first. So I thought I'd ask the freaking bagpipe player.
Well,
Where's this music coming from? Anybody? Rhythmically speaking.
I think like to an extent, experience from playing sort of different kinds of bagpipe musics to an extent. And then
see, in that part there, like we're going to play a bit of your music, if that's okay with you. And then I'll say to you, where is this music coming from rhythmically?
Sure. Yeah.
And
Perfect.
For me, like, I mean, one of my favorite songs to play live is Fear of Flying, because rhythmically it makes me want to move. And I mean, that's what I like. I mean, I love listening to like Seun Kuti, who's fellow Kuti's son, and the Afrobeat sounds where it's all rhythm and it's all groove, and it makes me want to move. And like, so, when I'm thinking about the bagpipe music that I want to write, usually it's got to have some kind of like danceable kind of feel to it. But then also we hail the almighty riff, so it's got to have something that, you can latch onto melodically and connect with. And that's kind of what the role of the riff is. But I'm sure you also want to ask us about our use of irregular time signatures, which is something that we do quite a bit. And like, I think that comes maybe for me personally, just because like I first started encountering like odd time signatures playing in bands in the Renaissance Festival. It's sort of a thing that a lot of artists out there on that circuit tend to do.
really, wow.
Yes.
Is this true, Michael?
Yeah, there was this one band that was around a bunch of years ago. They were just fabulous. It was like they had this drummer, Tim Mayer, and he was just fabulous. Every song was in like 13 or 11 or something, and it was just he just grooved. Everything just grooved. They were like the band that everybody else wanted to be,
What was it called?
And they're called Vadamazi. I don't know if they're still around. This guy Ian
Vadamazi.
Vanamazi. Yeah,
Vanamazi.
and and they're super influenced by the Bulgarian brass band music and the Eastern European brass band musics that are just these wild, fast, really intricate. That has a lot of tapan playing as well.
Who was the guy, Ivo? What was his name that made that music very popular?
I'm not sure.
Ivo Perelman. But the
I'm not sure.
that area of music.
The Balkan stuff, yeah.
Yeah, the Balkan.
So yeah, we would definitely hear, at the Renaissance Fair, you'll hear a lot of like Irish music and stuff, and a lot of sort of, which actually is, you'll hear a lot of 6/8 and stuff and 9/8 stuff that you wouldn't necessarily normally hear. That's not 4/4. And yeah, there are these bands like Volgamut, the German band we played, and they'd throw out a 7 tune every now and again.
Yeah.
Or
that was my first exposure to like 7.
You know what's funny about that is that it's from dance.
Yeah.
I think that
really,
from my experience with Armenian music, which is where I play tumbek, is that it's about the dance moves. And then you kind of go from there, and there might be other versions, or there might have been recorded versions that you kind of learn along the way. But when you're talking about original stuff like that,
yeah, we would learn.
Why would you think 4 is kind of arbitrary to think 4? It's as long as it takes. This is what you teach when you teach melody. You say to somebody, please don't worry about the meter when you're thinking melody. Just let the melody flow. And don't think about the meter. The meter will be figured out later, because you're already distracting the meter from doing its job.
That's exactly what happened when I wrote this tune of ours called The Cultivator. Like I was talking about the riff being so important. It just starts with a melody, and riff is just a simplified melody, right? It's just a short phrase that can be repeated, and it's recognizable. But with The Cultivator, it just started with that riff, and it happened to be in 7. And so then I just kind of followed melodically the idea of where that riff would take me. And it actually ended up taking me into like a mixed meter where each bar would be in a different time signature, and just kind of created this interesting, almost like mosaic of time and melody, so we call it The Cultivator. And that's one of our favorite tunes to play live.
Probably the most progressive. That and Eclipse are probably the two most proggy tunes that we play. Right, that or Tupelo turn. There's like a few that get into that territory,
And tell people where they can find you online.
Well, you can stream us on Spotify. We've got 2 albums on Spotify right now. We've got our first album, The Shape of Piping to Come, which we recorded as a quartet with 2 bagpipes and 2 drums. And then we've got the Tupelo Turn, which is mostly just Mike and myself. Me on bagpipes and Mike on drums, but there's a couple tracks where Armando plays bass as well.
That's great. And look for them on Spotify. And I have to say, you guys are awesome. And I wish you, nothing but success with this, because it's such a cool aggregation, and we need more cool aggregations out there. And you guys are so like SoCal.
I'm the only one actually from SoCal. These guys are like from random places in the world.
But
I'm from Arizona.
See, I'm jealous, because that's where I want to be. I want to be where Armando is, or in Culver City, or in Venice. That's my dream that I have every few nights. But no, seriously, it's I have a lot of bands that come from LA. People know my band Interzone. People know Bone Structure, if you know those bands. But, projects with Nels Cline, projects with Alex Klein, and just always feeling like the LA scene had its own thing. And that's why you guys are, on the ProgCast, and really that whole idea of, in LA, this is tolerated. Now, you found out that it was tolerated in other regions, which I find very interesting. Not as interesting as the fact, well, probably the same. It's also interesting that this is something that exists in the LA area. So it's always interesting how this stuff exists. But you guys got to record and put more stuff out.
I agree.
All right.
Absolutely.
Michael Hebner. Thank you, David Duncan. Thank you, Armando Wood. Peace
Thank you, Greg.
Thanks, Greg.
to you guys.
Thank
See
you.
ya. Bye.